All right, a couple more breaths. And last one. Okay, how does that feel? I could have mentioned it before, but one mindful thing you can add to that practice when you feel like you need to do a check-in is take a bit of an inventory before you do the breaths on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, how stressful are you feeling? If you feel kind of disconnected a little bit from your body and you're not really sure how you feel, take a few moments and just do a bit of a body scan. So either head to toe, toe to head, and just close your eyes and feel the sensations in your body. Pay attention to the different parts of your body as you're going up or down, and notice where you're holding tension. Are your shoulders hunched up? Do you need to drop them? Is your tongue on the roof of your mouth? Drop it. Does your jaw, are you clenching your jaw, right? There's little indicators that will tell us, our body will tell us when we feel stressed. And then we can evaluate that a little bit. We can tell by our body and how we're feeling. And then after we take the breaths, we can then evaluate again. How am I feeling? Has the number gone down? Do I need to take a few more breaths? So always a reminder there, right? I don't think I can say it enough. So tonight we're going to talk about triggers. Our masterclass is called Jolted. Hi, Sonia. And it's really just an introduction to the concept of triggers, what they are, and how we can start to move through them with a little bit more grace and ease. So to start out, what are triggers? If you have an idea, pop them in the comments. We can give it a moment. You can do this if you're watching the replay too. I'll interact with you after. And these classes always, they live in the Living on Lemonade group. So I'm so glad you did, Sonia. So triggers, essentially, they're any word, person, event, or experience that create an immediate emotional reaction. Do we agree on that? Okay. We're going to go deeper, as we always do, right? We start with a bit of a definition, and then we kind of dive into it. Margot says, when a comment or something said to you creates a reaction. Absolutely. Absolutely. Something makes you pop. Yeah, exactly. Right. Like there's an immediate, like, bam, it hits you. And as we go deeper, we'll talk a little bit more about that. So I like to talk about things kind of on kind of two levels, oftentimes like a kind of a spiritual level, and then I also I love neuroscience and psychology and biology, right? So I can talk about it in terms of like how our body is navigating these experiences, what's going on. So the more we can understand it, the more compassion we can give ourselves and have awareness. We can pick up on things quicker and move through it a little bit easier, right? We don't have to be so hard on ourselves. So to start out, we're going to talk about, who remembers what the amygdala is? We've talked about it a few times. And I'm always amazed that when we're choosing new topics and we do the polls and stuff and people vote, it's been such a beautiful progression on the topics that we've talked about, because they just have naturally really built on each other really well. So the amygdala, you might remember from when we talked about stress and other topics, is that it is the primitive brain, Sonia. It's that fight or flight, reactive, emotional center, like part of our brain. It's part of our early development in our like evolution. And one thing I learned that I found very interesting is the amygdala stores trauma and fear reactions. So experiences that we have that we might not be thinking about consciously, our amygdala stores those experiences. So when we get triggered, it hits on those experiences that rest in the subconscious mind, and it brings it to the surface. And we know that the amygdala, when it gets activated, it creates that fear response, which then brings the it fires up or starts the autonomic nervous system and sympathetic nervous system response, right? Sorry, I'm having a bit of brain fog tonight. It will speed up our heart rate, our raise our blood pressure. We get clammy, we get kind of disoriented, and when it activates that moves us into that fight, flight, or freeze. We can, like, sometimes we're kind of in a daze, right? We don't even really react because we go into that that reaction. And then it'll start to release those hormones, the adrenaline, the cortisol, those stress hormones, right? That do all kinds of things around our body. And the other thing about that's really interesting is when the amygdala fires up and is like super active, it shuts down our prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is one of the last things, as our brain is developing and we're growing and learning, our prefrontal cortex is one of the last things that's developed. It's not fully developed until we're in basically our mid-20s. So prefrontal cortex is in charge of logical reasoning, problem solving, and really kind of that like grounded, good decision making stuff. So when we look at kids and they have like absolute meltdowns, there's no logic we can give them, right? And part of it's just because their prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet. So when we have a hard time talking on the same level and we're trying to talk them down, when that doesn't work, that's part of the reason. And then, a big example, we can look at teenage boys, right? They do silly things. We can also blame part of that on the prefrontal cortex. So when the amygdala is all fired up, we are not thinking logically. We're not able to make decisions from a logical, calm standpoint. Not only is our body fired up with all the systems going, at warp speed in certain ways, but that part of our brain that allows us to kind of work through things is offline. So we're kind of like between a rock and a hard place, right? So you just lived that 3 weeks ago. Yeah. Yeah. And it happens. No problem, Allison. Welcome. So what do trigger reactions look and feel like? Feel free to share them in the comments as I go through it. I want to kind of keep on track as much as I can to respect your time. Things that it can look like or feel like when we get triggered. We can feel scared. We can lose our temper. We can feel hurt. We can feel stricken with grief. We can feel shocked, right? Has anyone experienced when you feel triggered? It can feel like an electric shock going through your body. It's like boom, and it just like it goes through, and then all of a sudden you're activated and you're reacting, right? I know I felt that so many times. It literally feels like a shock to the body. Like it goes through all my body. You can feel like you've had the wind knocked out of you. You get bad news. It can trigger. You can feel like you're falling apart. That's another one. And I want to say, I did post this morning in the group. There is a kind of like an opposite to, triggers can also be positive, right? We're gonna focus on the difficult ones because those are the ones we struggle with, and I want to help give you some tools. But triggers can also be positive. They can evoke joy, excitement, pride, nostalgia, all those good things too, right? When we see someone we recognize out on the street we haven't seen in a while, we can also get like kind of triggered with this excitement. So it doesn't always have to be something negative. Just want to bring your awareness to that as well. All right. So we're going to go a layer deeper. I'm just going to take a quick drink of water. So we're going to talk about triggers in the ego. Now, the ego, we can talk about it from like a spiritual lens, but it is a construct that's used in psychology and yeah, spirituality. But also I listen to a neuroscience podcast because I love neuroscience, and he mentions it too. So it's in both spirituality and science, which is cool. Now, triggers, what do they do? What are they really doing on like the bottom level? They are, we've talked about it, I think, a bit before. When we talked about the shadow, we had that shadow masterclass. Triggers point us directly to our shadow. Our shadow are our unhealed inner wounds, our inner child, the places that we feel powerless. Triggers will point to the places we are out of our power. It will also point to unfinished business. When you think about it, if there's not some part of us that, needs growth in an area, we want to get triggered. Like, have you ever been with a friend and they get triggered by like the most, it could be anything really, but you're not triggered at all. It's not part of your healing journey, right? There's something inside of them that's needing to be healed, and it's very, very evident when that happens. But we all have our own sore spots. Really, it's shining a light to our sore spot. And as much as it can be scary and frustrating, when we want to heal those parts and to help us grow as individuals, they're really kind of a blessing, because they're showing us, they're shining a light straight on the path of where we need to go. Old trauma that needs to be healed. Yeah, awesome. We're going to talk about the ego a little bit too. So as we're developing as kids, this is when, like I've talked about, the prefrontal cortex is not developed. This is that vulnerable age where our belief systems are established. It's like the computer of our brain is being programmed. The problem with that, though, is we're not in charge of it. We don't control it yet because our prefrontal cortex hasn't come online, and we can't decipher and choose what we want to believe or what we don't, or what really feels good to us. We just take all this stuff in, and then we kind of like, once we kind of wake up to it and start looking at things going, this doesn't serve me anymore. We have to reprogram our own brain, kind of, right? We have to update the software. That's kind of how I see it. And once we have established this kind of identity, our identity is our thoughts and our feelings and our beliefs, what we think about the world and how we view ourselves. Like, I believe myself, I am someone who, that's part of our identity, right? And our ego is this kind of construct that comes in, and it wants to protect our identity. And the reason why it wants to protect our identity is because that primitive part of our brain wants to keep us small, and it wants to make sure that we're safe so that we can A, survive, and B, procreate so we can continue our species. And that's that very like primal, what do they call it, mammalian brain. And it doesn't care about our desires and our happiness and our ability to grow. It doesn't want us to do any of those things, because growth is scary, change is scary, and we might die, right? That's what our brain's telling us. So when we get hit with these things that are past wounds and stuff, and things to look at and maybe change, that ego's like, no, we're gonna protect you. And the first line of defense for the ego is anger. And that's why we have that first like hit of like, we have a reaction. Does that make sense so far? And one thing I want to say about anger, I had heard this before, and I think it was through, I read it again to kind of validate it. I don't know if the first source was the same as when I read it again, but I read Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart. It's a fantastic book if you want to understand emotions more. But she talks about anger, and it makes it, I resonate with it so much. She talks about anger as a secondary emotion. Anger it's like a reaction to something deeper. Anger is masking something that we don't want to fully show. Anger can look like sadness, it can look like grief, it can look like frustration, it can look like disappointment, it can look like a whole slew of things that we don't want to show vulnerably. So anger kind of masks us. It kind of, it protects those deeper emotions that are harder to kind of look at, right? And bring to the surface, especially in front of others. Does that does that make sense? So when we can become aware, like when we have those knee-jerk reactions and we immediately respond with anger, we know there's a trigger there. And what do we need to look at? So I'm going to list off 9 categories of triggers, like common categories of why we would get triggered, things that are kind of a little bit deeper. Number 1 is feeling self-conscious, right? If someone kind of, um, puts us in, we're self-conscious about something, maybe it's like our weight, and then someone makes a comment to us. It could be to us, it could be about us in front of people that can be embarrassing, or just they just make a comment about us, like they say something about what we're wearing, and if we're self-conscious about it, it can trigger us, right? Because we want to protect that vulnerability inside of us. Number 2 is being discounted. Nobody likes to be discounted, right? We like to feel like we are, what's the word? Valid, worthy. Number 3 is feeling that we're being controlled. That also doesn't sit well with most people. There's a lot of people that get pretty fired up when you tell them what to do. And maybe it's just you need some support, and they take it the wrong way because they feel like you're starting to control them. And it's like, I'm not trying to control you. I just need a little support. So that's where you can, communicate and establish boundaries. Number 4 is being taken advantage of. Another really big one, right? When we feel like we were being walked all over, and especially when we start to do this type of work, we start to peel back those layers. We start to set those boundaries. We start to really know what we will and will not show up for now or accept. And being taken advantage of is one of those things. Being vulnerable. We want to protect ourselves from being vulnerable in a lot of situations if we don't feel safe, whether it's consciously or subconsciously. Sonia says, anger. With my recent experience, I asked myself, why did I pop? What is behind this? Exactly. And that is the exact work. And Margot says, getting curious, peeling back layers. Yep. This work that I teach is really, I'll never say it enough, but I really want to stress that when we do this work, the most beautiful and organic way to do it is when we can take a step back, almost as if we're observing it mindfully, right? And not making it about anything specific, just observing it and detaching from it as much as we can, so that we don't feel shame and guilt around it, and we can build ourselves up. Number 6, relationship experiences. I think we all know from if we've been in a long-term relationship, especially, people grow and change, right? And our partners and the people we spend a lot of time with, doesn't have to be a partnership, could be a friendship, could be with our parents. Parents can be hella triggering. I will say that. They can, they'll hit those spots, right? Number 7, boundary concerns. Again, when we start to develop boundaries, people will push back, right? Because those who resist our boundaries the most are the ones who benefited the most from us not having them. So they'll be the ones that'll give you the most pushback, and that can be triggering because you're trying to set this new boundary for yourself, and they're not having it, and it can feel all sorts of ways. Number 8 is feeling uncomfortable about what is happening. So when you're just in a difficult situation, it can be very triggering because you want to get out of it, and yeah, we're always humans are always looking for, I would say, the passively least resistance in terms of how can we not feel uncomfortable or feel pain, right? We will go to great lengths to not feel pain. And at the same time, we cling to things and we create so much suffering for ourselves because we don't let go. And it can become this like vicious loop. So we have to just be able to take a step back, observe it, like what's really uncomfortable here? Why do I feel uncomfortable? And then number 9, fearing what might happen. Just fear of the unknown. Ego hates it. That primitive brain is like, it wants to know all the answers. This is why we create expectations for ourselves and we hold on so tightly to how we think things should be, because there's control and there's predictability about it. But as we know, life just doesn't work that way. So when we can have that awareness and see that if something's not going the way we think it should be, we can have that evaluation time and say, hey, what kind of expectation am I putting here? And how am I creating my own suffering right now? Because I'm expecting things to be a certain way. So to kind of continue with this talk, essentially, triggers move us into a defensive mode, right? We immediately kind of put our wall up, or we feel like we've been backed into a corner, and we get defensive. We have that like knee-jerk reaction, and we're ready to like, dig our claws in. And one very common thing that we like to do, especially when it's a person that's triggered us, is one of our first kind of outlets for dealing with this is to blame the person, right? We're blaming this person for our triggers. But essentially, they're just kind of collateral damage. They've just said something or done something, many times or most times not trying to trigger us, but they do. And then we kind of dive at them, and they're just, all they've done is pointed something within ourselves that we need to look at. It's an inside job. Now, one of the things we say is just, when we could say is like, if they could just do this, things would be better. Have you ever thought that? Like if they just stopped doing that, it would be so much better. Or if they just did that, right? I think we've all done it. I know I have. I'll totally like, hands up. And really all that is needing something to be different so that we can be comfortable, right? If they would just do that. And an extension of that, when we need someone outside of us to change a behavior or an action or whatever is going on, to change something externally so that we can be comfortable, that is a very a big red flag. That is a big indication that we are out of our own power. Does that make sense? Or not do that exactly. Do this, they would just do that, they would just not do, if they would stop doing that. When we need them, we need someone else that we have no control over to change something so that we feel better inside. where's our power, right? Where's our power? So the work is to start looking at those places. Where am I being hit? What needs to be looked at? What needs some love, you know? What experience, and it doesn't, the word trauma can be thrown around, and it doesn't have to be this um like life altering event. There can be small traumas, right? When we talked about the inner child and stuff, and just how our experiences shape us, it could be just a comment someone made to us, or about us, that we ended up hearing later or whatever. And the thing is, children don't understand sarcasm. That's one thing. So an adult could make a sarcastic remark and the kid doesn't get it. They don't understand the context or however it's delivered, but they end up getting, it gets linked with like shame or whatever, because it's just like they just don't understand it. And instead of just, they said something, it goes to a whole new level. It's like they end up making it, we make it about us. Some like, oh, I'm not this then, or I'm that, right? And maybe it was just like a totally in a context, had nothing to do really with what we end up defining it as and attaching ourselves to it. And then we carry that, right? Like subconsciously. And then when an experience, sometimes like if an experience feels similar to that initial one that we really didn't get to like fully carry out, it shines that light right on it. It's like, oh, the brain remembers, the amygdala that stores that trauma and that emotion, it remembers. And it's like, hey, you didn't deal with that. And that's okay, right? Because it's not that we decided not to deal with it when we were 6 and someone said that thing, we took it out of context. It's just, we're looking at it again. It's a direct line to it, right? Um, yeah. Sonya's talking about how crazy it can sound when we expect the other person to change their behavior to suit us. And it's kind of funny, right? When we really break it down that way, it's like, whoa, yeah, it was a huge light bulb moment for me, because it's like, holy shit, I do that. And why am I expecting them to change so I feel comfortable, right? And it's just like, I don't shame myself for it. It's kind of like, whoa, okay. I'm gonna pay attention to that, because that's not gonna help me going down the road, right? It causes our own suffering. Then we're just like, we cling to that, like, oh, they have to do this, and it doesn't work that way. So let's talk about reclaiming our power. The work with this stuff, because we're out of our own power, we're expecting people to change, or we're denying those things inside of ourselves that need to be looked at. The work is to start looking at those places and reclaiming our power. So in order to reclaim our power, for one, we got to face the demon, right? We got to face the wound. We have to face the fear, whatever these triggers are looking at. We got to look at it, be brave. We have to surrender to it, right? What can we learn when we get curious? And I always talk about mindfulness and like how it is just it's such a foundation for existing when you want to live a bigger, more joyful life, and you want to kind of upgrade that programming, update the software, right? And work through that stuff. It's lifelong, it never ends. There's a million onion layers, but in order to heal it, we can't cling to it, for one, right? So when we're expecting someone to be different, or a circumstance to be different, doesn't have to be a person, can be a circumstance. When we are clinging to this notion that this circumstance, this person, these actions, these whatever's going on has to be different so that we can feel good about it and we can accept it, we're going to get tired. Like, it's going to start hurting, right? The longer and the harder we cling to it, it's going to hurt. And Surrender. That's the answer. We have to find surrender. We have to just get curious about it. What is this trigger trying to teach me? What do I need to look at? What do I need to get curious about and throw some love at? That's kind of how I see it, right? Um, yeah. When we begin to surrender, this is what can happen. So we have to be very mindful of it. Surrendering can bring up fear that the wound is the truth of who we are. I'm going to say that again. Surrendering can bring up the fear that the wound is the truth of who we are. Does that make sense? And that can be terrifying, right? Because this thing we've decided about ourselves, or this experience that we have that we haven't looked at since it happened, or this thing that this person said that we really like, we buried deep inside, when it comes back up to the surface through a trigger and this mindfulness and this wanting to look at it, it's like, oh my God, do I look at that? Because what if it's true? What if that is how I am? What if that is who I am? What if that's the truth about me? Can I accept that? It's scary, right? And to kind of start bringing this all in a little bit, I'm going to talk about a 3-part practice. When we first started talking about triggers, we have the trigger, right? Someone says something, we have a situation that's happening, whatever that looks like for you. We have the trigger, and then immediately the reaction, right? Trigger, reaction, 2 things. The next step we want to take in order to start to move through this and make these experiences a little bit easier on us, we have the trigger, we have the reaction, and the next thing we're going to talk about is the resource, right? So the steps that we take afterwards, which we've already started really. And then eventually as we start to embody these things, right? They start to become who we are. We're really like, we're upgrading. And having that awareness, we end up eliminating the reaction, or at least, if not fully every time, we can at least, it can be quicker before we use the resource. But ultimately, in some or most cases, we would love to go from trigger to resource, because we recognize a trigger right away. And then before like claws out, we put our resources, our tools in place, and then we move through it. We have the awareness. We look at what it is. We get curious. What is this? What's coming up for me? What do I need to look at? What do I need to throw some love at so that we can move forward and this isn't going to cripple me later? Because it seems that when we don't look at these things and we ignore it, they just, I don't know about you, but hands up if you resonate with this, but it's just like, it'll keep coming back. And each time it comes back, it's worse. It feels worse. It feels more, we feel more out of control. And I had a situation that, the reason why I can talk about this from what feels like an embodied place is, if you've been following along for a while, you know that I was struggling at the beginning of the year. Like, honestly, I've never been so low mentally ever in my life. I've had some dark ass times. I've gone through a lot of grief, and I was clinging to a situation I would have never had any control over, not with the players in the game, ever, never. And not only were they, some were oblivious, some are just, sometimes we get into situations with people who are vindictive, they are unkind, they are out to hurt us. And that makes it even worse sometimes. But I was in a situation, and really I'm still in grief. I'll always be in grief, but like very deep in grief. And this situation just amplified it. Like I I remember being curled up in a ball, and this is like very vulnerable, but just like, where's the exit button? Get me out of here. I couldn't, I was so I felt so pressurized by this situation that I had. I wanted to be, I wanted to be different so badly that I was crippling myself under the pressure of it, of this thing that I would never, ever have control of. And I won't go into like all the dirty details, but essentially it really had to do with my dad's wishes, his belongings, and how they were distributed at the end of the day. My sisters and I we still technically are, but I think it's pretty much over. Um, we're chasing online auctions. We had to buy my dad's childhood toys and many of his personal belongings that we grew up with in our home and, you know, saw every day, and things that he wanted us to have. We'd had these verbal conversations with, but unfortunately, it was not put in writing, and things were not handled how we know that he would have wanted. So it was very dysregulating. And I mean, grief brings a whole new level to it, right? When you're already in the throes of that, it's already so emotional, and you just want those pieces of that family member, right? So that it brought me to my knees in a way that it never has been. And I had to surrender. I had to surrender and accept it is what it is. And I can't change them. I can't change these people. I can't make them want to do what I feel and what I feel my dad would say is the right thing. And based on our conversations, I can't make them give us an opportunity. We were pretty much the last, his children were the last to get his belongings. So what was left? It was a very sad situation, and I had to fully detach and surrender to it, and then just find peace. And I worked with a spiritual coach. I did a deep dive, and I can tell you, it changed my life. I could talk about it now without feeling triggered. I'm it's too bad. It is what it is, but it brought my sisters and I closer, and I learned a lot, and I can talk about it now, right? I can help other people through it because I've been through the depths. I've been curled up in the ball, crying in bed, wanting to hit that ejection button or eject button and just like be launched out into the ethers and not have to deal with this like human existence anymore. I've been there. I know the deepest, darkest parts. So if you're going through a hard time, I send you so much love. And it's important to have people that you can reach out that are safe spaces for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the resources. I don't want to stay in that space too long, but I do want to be relatable too to my own situations, right? So this is how we connect and build community, when we can relate with each other on some level. So we're going to talk about two different types of resources. We have psychological resources and spiritual resources. So we're going to talk about psychological resources. And now what they can look at as what they look like is they help us develop inner resources like awareness of our needs, ability to express our needs and fulfill them in the right place. So this would include boundaries and other things, right? So it's how do we get what we need and what we desire and fulfillment? Does that make sense? Psychological needs? That's our mindfulness, our boundaries. This leads us to getting what we need and to take care of ourselves. Hi, Michelle. Sonia says some people have values opposite to us and it hurts. Absolutely. And at certain points I tried to, naturally we try to manipulate the situation. We try to like, make them see the light or prove to that, like whatever. I see that now because I'm just like, I just had to let it go. It was killing me. Honestly, I don't know if I would have survived another round of that. It's hard to it's hard to bring the right words to it. Now, secondly, we've got spiritual resources. So, so mindfulness would go more into this category: meditation, mindfulness, freedom from attachment. So that's surrender and letting go of the ego. These are all those, those spiritual deep level practices. And I guess technically, like if you're not spiritual, you don't have to look at it from that lens. They're kind of from like a, how do I want to say this? That's how they can be perceived, right? But you can still be mindfulness and not be spiritual. I feel like there's an element, if you're in my world and stay in my world, there's probably an element of that in your life, and that's how we resonate with each other. But certainly, if you're here for the more of the science and the neuroscience part of it, that's cool too. I love both. So yeah, take what I've said this before, but take what you want and leave the rest, right? Take what resonates from you, those little there's a lot of information. You don't have to take it all and take it back with you. What are one or two nuggets, and whatever kind of like hits for you right away, it's like, oh, the light bulb goes on, you go, dang, like that was good. That's what you need at the time. And then if you come back later and watch this again, or I watch trainings more than once all the time, and it's like I get new pieces of information, especially if there's been a period of time where I've done some work. I get new realizations, right? Like things that weren't available to me previously because I just hadn't moved into a new understanding of something, right? It all makes sense to me anyway. Now, in terms of using these psychological and spiritual resources and your body, what that looks like is we use these resources and they help to calm our sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight activation, what's the word, like system of things that happens. And it brings our prefrontal cortex back online so we can like have a thought in our mind and make decisions and start to be a little bit rational. And it allows us to shift from reaction to respond. And there's a difference. Reacting is just like you're all in, you're not thinking about it. It's very rash. Again, that prefrontal cortex is not working. It's offline. Respond is when we can take a deep breath, take a step back, and go, all right, what's going on here? And get curious, and then like, how do I move forward? That's responding, right? It's not, you're not just like doing it on a whim, you're actually thinking it through. And you need that prefrontal cortex in order to do that. So we need to be in a state of more rest and digest, that parasympathetic state. No problem, Michelle. She said she missed the beginning. That's okay. You can catch the replay. And another great thing about when we start to repeat a practice, we talk about neuroplasticity. If you're not familiar with that, it is, essentially we have these neural pathways, right? And when we take an action and it has a result, it creates a synapsis. It's like this equals this equals this. And the more that we do things, the more they become kind of hardwired in our brain. But the wonderful thing is our brains are very malleable, which means that they can be molded and changed. So when we start to change our actions towards something, our brain starts to rewire. And don't forget, when we first start to do something that's a change, we're going to have that ego flare up a little bit because it's like, oh, no, you can't do that. We have to stay how we were because that was safe and it kept us alive. But if we want to go into a more joyful, less painful existence with our experiences, we have to make some of those changes. We have to be able to face the fear and move through it anyway, and just tell our body, this is where that nervous system work comes from, right? Breath work, hand over heart. You can do orienting. So essentially, if you're not familiar with orienting, it's looking around. You can look at things that are close to you and further away. And you're orienting, you're getting familiar with your surroundings. And it's kind of it's a trick to the brain essentially to remind your brain that you're safe. There's no tiger that's about to pounce on you, because our brain doesn't know the difference between real danger and perceived danger of like, oh God, if I do that thing to like, better my life, I might die. That's what our brain thinks. When we have to look around and say, no, I'm good. I'm good. Does that make sense? Are there any questions so far? Let me know. And I want to reference, I read a book, well, most of a book called Triggers by David Richo, that helped me with solidifying some of the things, because we always have our experiences and like our own kind of snow globe wisdom, but it is kind of fun to have some more like formal reading as well. So I try to have a bit of both. And then of course one of my coaches is like, she has some like incredible wisdom, so I've learned about triggers from her as well. So we're going to do a quick visualization, just a quick meditation if you're ready. And honestly, I had written a note and I'm like, what am I even going to do? I just thought I'm going to leave it and it's going to come to me how to deliver this. So we're just going to take a couple moments. This is going to be a quick one. And we're going to close our eyes. If you need to take a couple more breaths to kind of ground in, if you've joined us since the beginning, just take a couple deep breaths. Big exhale if you need it. Kind of wash away the day. It's been a little bit chaotic or whatever's going on in life. One more big deep breath. And I want you to bring to mind a recent experience you've had. Bring to mind one of your triggers you've had lately. Just kind of hold it, like almost like you're witnessing it in front of you. Maybe it's something someone said. Maybe it's something someone did. Maybe it's just a situation in general. Just think about it for a moment. And I want you to take notice. So we're going to get mindful first. How does it feel in your body? You're thinking about this. Where is it kind of hitting in your body? I know that can sound like a weird question, but when we, take those deep breaths and we sink back into our body, we get out of our monkey mind, as we would like a kind of a Buddhist term. There's wisdom there. You can just think about it right now. We won't worry about comments because we're in the moment. But where are you feeling it in your body? And just take notice of that. Do you feel like a ping? Are you having a bit of a physical reaction? Do you feel that nervous system, autonomic nervous system coming online? And then there's no shame, no guilt in it. Just observe it. That's okay. It's okay that you're feeling this way. It's a good thing. And then just take a moment, get quiet, make sure you're nice and quiet, and ask yourself, what is this trigger pointing to? What is the wisdom inside of this trigger? What is it? What does it want me to see? What can I learn from this? Just take a moment with it. Maybe you'll see an experience that you totally forgot about. Maybe words will come to you. Maybe you'll see something. Like if you were to close your eyes and I say, picture a rose, sometimes we get information that way. It's really interesting. And just sit with that for a moment. if it gives you this like this vibe. I know there's been times when I've been triggered and it made me really sad. And the best example I can describe is um it kind of gave me the vibes of like when I was in elementary school and I didn't get picked for the team. Like it's, you can kind of bring it back to like, it feels like I was left out or they didn't pick me. And if you can kind of get into the feel or the experience of what this trigger is showing you or any thoughts around it, if you want to go a layer deeper, ask yourself, like, what did I need in those moments? Or what do I need? If you feel like you're back in that experience, what do I need? And if you need words of encouragement or you need like a big old hug, nice kiss on the forehead, give that to yourself. Return it to you. Give yourself what you needed in that experience that you didn't get at the time. Just wrap yourself with so much love because it's okay. And now thank yourself for showing you, allowing whatever triggered you, be it a person or what they said or what they did or a situation. Thank yourself for allowing that trigger to show you something in yourself that needed some extra support so that it doesn't have to be so loud next time. Send it so much love. Just surround it with so much love. And when you start to feel a little bit lighter from it, kind of come back into the moment. How does that feel? That's totally unscripted. I had no idea where we were going with that. It felt good. And I mean, you can do this anytime, right? Just remember, have that curiosity and that love and that compassion for those deeper parts of you that need a little bit extra love. Calm and peaceful. If there's anything else you want to share from it, what you felt, where you felt it in your body, what it felt like, um, what you gave yourself to support it, feel free to share. You can not share. You could message me offline, like outside of here. But essentially, we're giving back to those pieces now when we have a greater awareness that prefrontal cortex is fully developed now. We can see that some of these things are no longer serving us, right? Because it doesn't feel good to get triggered and then like say a mean thing to someone and they're really just like, oh, I don't even know what I did, right? And we've all done it. It's okay. It's part of being human. It's part of our conditioning. But how much better does it feel when we can throw some love at those parts of us and just like lighten the load a little bit, right? That's kind of how I feel when I do it. So kind of a final thought as we're finishing up here. Because I talk a lot about like when I think about these previous experiences, I kind of see like previous versions of myself, maybe it's like different ages or just different versions that have not learned the things that I've learned since. And when we can think about it that way, I feel like I heard this from somewhere, but it's just like when we're driven through life by our triggers, it's like allowing the 6-year-old version of ourselves that live within us to be in the driver's seat of our life. Does that make sense? We're kind of essentially allowing the previous versions of ourselves to be driving our life. And I mean, if I was to let my 6-year-old self drive drive the be in the driver's seat of my life, I think we'd crash a lot. And I have, but that's okay. So are there any questions as we kind of finish up here? Any final thoughts, feelings? I'm going to share my screen quick because I'm going to share what's next, which I'm excited about. A few things. Actually, I'm going to take a really quick drink. 6-year-old, 6-year-old driving. Yeah, isn't it's kind of funny when we look at it that way, right? It brings a little bit of like greater awareness and context to something that can be so dysregulating and so just like scary and hard. And when we can kind of break it down a little bit, shine a little bit of light, put some love on it, and just see it like, ooh, don't let your 6-year-old drive. Then it's just like, remember that. And then the next time you get triggered, it's like, oh gosh, I gotta have a pep talk with that 6-year-old. Makes it not as serious and scary. All right, let me, where do I share my screen? Why do I always lose? Like, I'm always like, where am I going here? Oh dear. Share screen. Of course, it's like the big green button. All right. This. Can you see this? So basically this is like, what else is up? What's next? I have to, 1 second. Oh, present. There we go. Our next free masterclass. Next month, October 12th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Inside this group, of course. It's called Life Force. And this one, like, I'm like ready for October 12th just because when I don't even know how I came up with it, but I was like, we got to talk about breath work. I also looked at the poll and it was kind of the next one that had the most votes. But a lot of the trainings that I've done previously, pretty much all of them, there's been some sort of like research to kind of bring it all full circle, right? And kind of solidify it. But man, breath work, I'm so passionate about. I'm so excited to talk to you about it because when I was really thinking back to it, it's like, oh my gosh, I have been doing this without even thinking about it since I was a kid, like when my mom taught me a couple things. And it's like, I cannot wait to share how conscious breathing can just change your life in so many magical ways. So learn how to use the magic of your breath to navigate life with more grace and ease. I'm all about it, right? And can't freaking wait to share the stories and stuff. So we have that coming up. That's the next free masterclass inside this group. That, of course, is in the Living on Lemonade group. And if you don't know already, these masterclasses end up as podcast episodes. So if you're a podcast listener, you can tune into the Living on Lemonade podcast. We have, I think, 27 episodes, which is incredible. Next thing, a couple paid offer options. I have a self-study course called Create Your Calm. Begin walking the path from stress to cool as a cucumber. So this is essentially 5 modules, and it's nervous system stuff, like it's introductory stuff, nervous system, mindfulness, meditation, stress. We talk about burnout, we talk about attachment and surrender. So it's going deeper into some of these topics and giving like a whole lot of tools. Margot took the class a year ago, and yeah, it's good stuff. So if you're interested in that, reach out to me. It's ready to go, ready to learn from. I also do like oracle card readings, so I use my own intuition. I offer inspiration and stuff. I kind of just like, I get quiet, I get back into my body, and I pull cards. I have like a few decks. So I do it either for business, if you want some inspiration for your business, or I can do it about life. So you can have a one-off reading where basically I'll do it like when I have time in between things. And then I send you pictures of the cards and I send you the messages. So it's really, really cool. So you can do a one-off reading for 30, or you can do a 3-month subscription for 75. So you would get one each month for 3 months. And introducing, if you're not in so I have a little network marketing group called No Hustle Sales. And I just announced it, I believe last week. I'm in the midst of creating a course for network marketers to help teach some of these tools. So if you're in network marketing and you're watching the replay, this will be relevant to you. It's called Triple Threat. It came to me while I was just like doing a big brain dump. I needed to get all the thoughts and ideas onto paper so they weren't pinging around in my head anymore. And not only did the name come to me, the byline came. So connecting mind, body, and soul for sustainable sales. This is all the kind of undercurrent stuff. This is like mindset and supporting your nervous system so that when you go do the next thing to grow your business and the fear comes in, like how do you not only support your mind through the fear stuff, but how do you support your body through it, right? It's like it's not something that I've ever seen talked about in this industry. So we're defining success in your business without hustle and shoulds. We're creating and leading from a solid foundation built on integrity, values, and desires, learning tools to navigate limiting beliefs, support your nervous system, tap into the magic of the intuition. It's starting the week of October 9th. I'm still getting all the final details. Lifetime access, live trainings, it's $111. The Create Your Calm courses also have $111, and it's lifetime access. You get access to meditations. I've uploaded meditations and stuff. They're both wonderful. So any questions about that, reach out to me. And most of all, thank you so much for hanging out with me this evening. It always just fills my cup, right? And my heart is full. I always have so much fun doing these and just like sharing stuff, right? And having these conversations. Just looking at the last bit. Sonia says, this is amazing, bang on. Thank you so much. It was so much fun. Margot says, I'm triggered easily by hubby. Oh my gosh. Partnerships will absolutely do that so much. There's so much healing. It's like where we pick each other, we come together to like heal, and it brings up all the stuff. So if you feel triggered a lot, it's I see it as a good thing, right? It's stuff to heal so that you don't have to struggle. We can laugh at ourselves and not take ourselves so seriously, push the ego aside. Yeah. And I mean, the ego's not bad. It wants to keep us safe. So it has its place. And we can thank it. We can thank it for wanting to keep us safe, and it just bringing further awareness to things. All right. I'm going to let everyone go because we're over time, but thank you so much for hanging out this evening. And if you have any questions along the way, just reach out, comment in here if you're catching the replay. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and we'll see you soon. We'll definitely see you next month for the breathwork masterclass and some posts in between. So take care, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Bye.